She almost didn't go. That's the thing nobody would write about later, when the photographs came out, and the comments flooded in, and the whole morning got folded into the kind of bright, breathless story that people share over their morning tea. Nobody would mention that Carole Middleton had stood in front of her wardrobe at 7:30, still in her dressing gown, one hand resting on the door frame, and thought, maybe not this year. Cheltenham had a way of doing that to her. Not badly. Not with grief, exactly. More with the specific weight of accumulated years, the way a place you've loved for a long time starts to carry everything you've ever felt inside it. The parade ring. The smell of damp grass and bookmaker's chalk. The sound of 30,000 people holding their breath at the same moment. Michael had loved it unreservedly. No complicated feelings. Just the horses, the hat, the hip flask, the sheer uncomplicated pleasure of a day well spent. She missed that. His capacity for uncomplicated pleasure. She closed the wardrobe, opened it again. The hat was on the top shelf, in its box, the way it had been for the better part of 8 months. She'd been keeping it safe. That was how she'd framed it to herself at the time. Keeping it safe. After Catherine had left it at the house one Sunday in July, coming in from the garden with the children, laughing about something James had said, and she'd set the hat box on the hall table and simply never taken it home again. Carole had noticed. She always noticed. She'd put it upstairs and not mentioned it, because Catherine had a way of forgetting things that weren't accidental, and Carole had spent 40 years learning the difference. She lifted the box down, set it on the bed. Inside, nestled in pale tissue, the hat was exactly as Catherine had left it. A deep, warm biscuit brown, the brim curved just so, the ribbon the color of old champagne. It was a Philip Tracy, not the theatrical sort that required scaffolding and a sense of humor about airports, but the other kind, the kind that understood a woman's face and worked quietly alongside it. Carole set it on her head in front of the mirror. She stood there for a long moment. Then, she picked up her phone and sent her daughter a voice note, 43 seconds long, that ended with a laugh she hadn't planned. The drive to Cheltenham from Berkshire had its own rhythm by now. The slip roads, the service station with the good coffee, the point on the M40 where the landscape opened, and the light changed, and something in your chest did too. She went with her friend Sandra, who had been going to Cheltenham since approximately the Bronze Age, and had opinions about it the way other people had opinions about religion. Strong ones. Occasionally unreasonable ones. Entirely her own. "You look wonderful," Sandra said, before Carole had even finished fastening her seatbelt. "It's Catherine's hat. I know whose hat it is." Sandra glanced at her. "You still look wonderful." Carole watched the road. "She lent it to me." That wasn't quite true, and they both knew it. But Sandra had been her friend since their children were in primary school, and she understood the economy of these small untruths, the way they sometimes hold a feeling steady long enough for you to carry it somewhere. "She would want you to wear it," Sandra said simply. And that was entirely, precisely true. The thing about being Carole Middleton at a public event in the year of our Lord was that you were never quite anonymous, but you were also never quite the point. You occupied a specific middle territory between private person and public figure, which was its own peculiar discipline. She had, over many years, developed a finely calibrated understanding of how much space to take up. Not too much. Never too much. She wore the hat the way her daughter would have worn it. Straight, no apology, shoulders back. She'd learned that from watching Catherine, which was one of the quiet reversals that came with a particular kind of motherhood, the moment when you begin to learn from the child you raised. It happened with all three of them, in different ways, at different moments. But with Catherine it had happened in public, and that made it extraordinary. By the time they joined their party near the parade ring, 3 people had looked at the hat a beat longer than the general. The particular quality of a look from someone who is recognizing something, but can't quite place what. Carole said nothing. She studied the form guide instead, the way Michael had always done, running a finger down the column of names. 3rd entry. Odds of 12-1. Trainer from County Tipperary. Jockey who had 3 falls last season but hadn't fallen since. She put 2 pounds on it. She lost. She didn't mind at all. The Gold Cup crowd was the kind that pressed. Not aggressively. Not with bad intent. Just the ordinary physics of 30,000 people wanting to see the same 20 yards of grass at the same time, so that by noon the enclosures had a gentle, insistent tide to them, and you moved with it whether you meant to or not. Carole had been separated from Sandra somewhere between the champagne bar and the bookmakers, which was, she reflected, the most Cheltenham sentence she had ever constructed in her head. She wasn't worried. Sandra had her number. Sandra also had a sixth sense for hospitality tints and could find her way to a complimentary canopy in a blizzard, so she was almost certainly fine. It was during the second race, standing alone at the rail, that the woman appeared beside her. 60, perhaps, possibly older, with the kind of bone structure that made the question irrelevant. She wore an extraordinary hat, rust-colored, sharply angled, the kind that stated a position rather than merely decorated one. She had a race card folded into a neat rectangle, and she was studying it with the focused intensity of someone who was not here for the champagne. She glanced over. "Philip Tracy," she said. Carole blinked. "Pardon." The woman nodded toward the hat. "The hat. Philip Tracy, isn't it?" "It is, yes." "Gorgeous piece." She returned to her race card. "Mine's Mawar Saadin, Israeli designer. Nobody ever recognizes it, which is either a tragedy or precisely the point. I haven't decided which." Carole liked her immediately. Her name was Evelyn. She'd been coming to Cheltenham for 31 years, starting the year her husband proposed to her in the car park. Very on-brand for him. Bless him. Absolutely no concept of occasion. And continuing every year since, including the two after he died, which she described without softness or drama, the way you describe a thing that is simply a fact of your geography now. "Do you have children?" Carole asked, and then, immediately, "Sorry, I don't know why I always ask that." "Because it's the thing that shapes people most," Evelyn said, as if this were obvious. "You can tell within 3 minutes whether someone is a parent. Not from what they say, from how carefully they listen." Carole considered this. "I have 3. I have 2. One who rings every Sunday, and one who doesn't ring at all but appears on my doorstep with wine, and an apology on a semi-annual basis, which I've come to find more moving than the Sunday calls, frankly." Carole laughed, the kind that came out before she had time to shape it. "Mine are," she started. Stopped. Started again, more carefully. "They're all very different. My eldest is the one who has become," she paused again. There was never quite the right construction for it. The thing her daughter had become, the particular unprecedented nature of it. "She's had a year that would have flattened most people." "But, not her," Evelyn said. "Not a question. No. A beat. Not her." The horses came out for the second race. Carole watched them circle, the muscled weight of them, the way the jockeys sat perfectly still while everything beneath them rippled with readiness. "That hat," Evelyn said, after a moment, "is not a borrowed thing. Not the way you're wearing it." Carole looked at her. "A borrowed hat sits differently. You can always tell." Evelyn tilted her head, considering. "That's a hat that belongs to you through someone you love, which is a different thing entirely." The starting gun fired. 30,000 people rose a quarter-inch on the collective balls of their feet. Carole watched the horses break from the gate and thought, yes, that's exactly what it is. Sandra found her 20 minutes later, slightly windswept, holding 2 glasses of moat with the triumphant expression of someone who had vanquished a significant cue. "There you are. I've been looking." "Oh, you've got color in your face." "I've been talking to someone." "Who?" Her name was Evelyn. She had an Israeli hat and 31 years of opinions about this racecourse, and she was, Carole took the glass. She was very good company. Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Are we friends with Evelyn now?" "We didn't exchange numbers." She paused. "I should have asked for her number." "You never ask for numbers." "I know." She looked out toward the parade ring. "I'm going to start." Sandra clinked her glass against Carole's with the quiet satisfaction of someone watching a small, incremental act of courage. "Good," she said. "It's about time." The afternoon stretched and softened the way March afternoons do when they're trying their best, the light going honey-colored by 3 o'clock, long shadows cutting across the turf. Carole backed 2 more horses. Lost one, broke even on the other, which felt like a small philosophical victory. She texted Catherine during the interval between the 3rd and 4th races. "Wearing your hat. It's getting compliments." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Tell it to behave. How's the going?" Carole smiled at that. The horse racing terminology, easy and instinctive, the way it came from childhood Christmases watching the King George on television with her father, the language passed down through the family the same way the hat now sat on her head. "Good," she typed back. "I'm good." She meant the going. She meant something else as well. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I know, Mom. I know you are." The photographs happen the way photographs always happen when you're not performing for them. She was laughing at something Sandra had said. Something about the man in the neighboring box who had been loudly explaining each race to his companion with the unearned authority of someone who had watched YouTube videos. And the hat was tipped very slightly. And The light was doing that honey-colored thing it had been doing all afternoon, and she was entirely herself for one unwatched, unguarded moment. She didn't know about the photographs until the car ride home. Sandra, scrolling through her phone somewhere past the services, said, "You're on Twitter." "I know I'm not on Twitter." "You are now." Sandra turned the phone. "Well, someone who spotted you is." The image was better than Carole would have predicted. The hat was sharp against the sky. Her posture was, she assessed it honestly, good. She looked like a woman who was having a day she chose to have.